All right, everybody, welcome back to the 42284 podcast. I'm back with Jeremy. We've got Kyle back.
A.K.A. Donnie Baker.
Yeah. He's used one of his 3 days of sick leave, we decided, so he had to come back.
Unpaid.
Boys, I'm too weak to take up for myself.
We're full.
We've fed them good before the podcast this time, so everybody's stuffed, I think. But this next guest, we're rambling outside of Sunfish just a little bit, down to Big Greedy. But his dad was well known in this community, spent a lot of time in this community, good friend of this community. And then we'll probably touch on his grandpa down at Big Greedy just a little bit too while we've got him here, because I thought a lot of him. We've got Mr. Kevin Alexander in studio.
Another elected official.
Yes. Kevin, you want to just kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and who your dad was and how he fits into this community to start with?
Well, I can. Thank you all for having me on here. I guess I've been following you guys. Seem to be having a lot of fun up here. This is good. I'm glad y'all are doing this. But
Big Greedy's not real far out of Sunfish either,
No.
right? I mean,
No.
it's basically same area. Everybody knows everybody.
What is it 4 miles, Sunfish School Road?
I'd say.
Yeah.
It's as close as Huff is. So.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, it's a suburb.
It's a
of
suburb.
Sunfish.
It's a suburb.
It touches Sunfish.
Yeah. So I'm a lifelong resident of Big Reedy. Been there all my life, 49 plus. But I grew up over in there. It's where my mom's people was from. My dad was from Brownsville, Charles Alexander. He's from Brownsville, and he got to Sunfish in the early 60s. It was he was a student at Campbellsville. Back then it was Campbellsville College. He was up there on an athletic scholarship. And my dad's the only one from his family that got the opportunity to go to college. But when he got up there, he was playing baseball and basketball, and an opportunity come along. There was a teacher shortage in the early 60s at that time, and they were allowing people to teach on what's called an emergency certificate. So there were some other people, other men that got started about that same time. One of them was Johnny Pete Vincent, so
Yeah, he was principal at Kyrock when I was
He was my principal, yeah.
He was a principal at the high school at Evans County for a long time in the 70s. And Gerald Meredith, who was, taught for many, many years there in Evanston County, and my dad. So they sent Johnny Pete to Kyrock, and they sent Gerald to Brownsville, and my dad got to go to Sunfish. And he didn't know anybody. He really didn't know anybody much over there. He knew some people he played sports against. He was good friends with some of the Keys.
So he was 24, 5-ish probably?
I'd say 20, probably
Maybe a
20,
little earlier.
probably 24, probably 24 or so.
And this is prior to him meeting your mother?
Oh, yeah. My mom was, my dad was 7 years older than my mom.
Okay.
So my mom was still in the school system. She was at the high school. Of course, the high school consolidated in that 59-60 school year. Dad had graduated high school in 59 from Brownsville.
Okay.
And he went to school originally down in Louisiana to play sports, but he wound up transferring. Matter of fact, I think the story goes is he hitchhiked pretty much all the way to Nashville from Natchitoches, I believe, was the town.
Really?
Yes. And so he gets back, and I think his mom and dad were kind of disappointed because they wanted him to go to school, and he had an opportunity. But anyway, he got to Campbellsville.
At that time, if you'd went to college if you lived in Brownsville or any of the areas here, and you went to college, even in Louisiana, that was a big thing, right?
Yeah.
Oh, no doubt.
I mean, you went to the other side of the world, basically.
Yeah, I mean, he athletics was it. I mean, that's how he got it. Dad was from a big family, and he really got kind of a tough start education wise. Probably not a whole lot of encouragement to be a real scholarly type person, but athletics was the ticket. And so he got up there. But anyway, what happened was there was an opportunity to teach on an emergency certificate, and that's how he got to Sunfish. And he had a couple people there that really helped him. Lloyd Wells was somebody that was really a helpful person to him. Mr. Wells lived over in the Big Greedy community, and he was real helpful. And I think Mr. Dwyer certainly was helpful too. Vernon was the principal there at that time. I'm not for sure about that. But yeah, that was, I think, Brandon, that was probably about I don't know if that was the 63, 64 school years. It was something like that. He was over a couple of years. Then he married my mom in January of 66, and he went back to Campbellsville and finished his degree up. Because when you teach on an emergency certificate, he didn't have his degree completed. So when they got married, he had to go back to Campbellsville. He finished it up, and then he come back for, I believe, the 66, 67 school year.
So do you have a story of how they met?
That's what I was wondering.
You know what?
There could be some interesting stories on that.
I tell you what, I didn't know this for a long, long time. I started working at Bank Evans County, and I was in my mid-20s, and I was over there one day, and I didn't know how my mom and dad met. There's a lady that worked with me, and she worked at Bank Evans County at that time, and she'd graduated high school with my mom. And she told a funny story about my dad. She said Franklin Alexander and his brother Owen ran the bank over there, and they were first cousins to my granddad Cecil, and they wanted a man from their family in that bank. They wanted a man in that family with the same last name as them to be working in there. And so they had tried my Uncle Billy, and I don't think he was really interested in it. Dad was in one summer. It was the summer of 1965, and he was working over there, and he was talking to a lady named Marcia. She was Marcia Skaggs. She just got married. Her name was Marcia Lindsay. She's Jonathan Lindsay's mom. Works for Warren Rural Electric.
Okay.
And they were in there one day, and Marcia said that Dad loved powdered donuts. He was sitting over a garbage can eating them powdered donuts, and said they were talking, and he asked her, said, do you know Joretta Woosley? And she said, oh, yeah. I said, I know. She said, I think she may be dating somebody right now. I'm not for sure, but of course, back then you weren't in touch with people every day. You telephone.
There wasn't Facebook.
Yeah, it wasn't Facebook. Facemail. But anyway, somehow they got fixed up, and I think they started dating maybe about in August. And by January, they were married. And got married, I reckon it was just an awfully snowy day. Had to put chains on to get...
What year did you say?
January of 1966.
66.
Yeah, and it was so bad, I reckon they had to put chains on for Dad to get from... Of course, he grew up over there under the bridge, over there on Lock Road, where all the Alexanders, that's where they all kind of started at. And my granddad had a farm over there, and him and Mom got married, and they took off back to Campbellsville, I reckon. So that's how they started.
Johnny Alexander's farm is...
Yeah, you go up to Alexander Cemetery and go back that field.
Correct.
Yeah.
Over that ridge, and there's a bluff back in there, and there's an old home place back in there.
There was
a home place I think's gone now, but when I was working for the power company, the lines where that home sits it ran back to it and stopped.
Oh yeah, it's a rough, kind of rough old farm, but that's
good cattle
It's
farm.
cattle farm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good cattle farm.
It run Johnny's ground run all the way down to the river.
Yeah.
And I reckon his, I guess Tony Steele and them probably own that now.
Probably.
Because Johnny only had one girl.
So when they went back to Campbellsville, is that where Joretta went to school to be a teacher?
She actually, Mom had a couple years in at Western. And so what happened was he went up there, and he kind of had to get it in road gear, I think, to get finished pretty quick so he could hurry up and get done and come back. And so Mom worked in a factory up there. And she was just, my mom, when they got married, she was just 19 years old. She was just a kid. And she worked, and after they got married, they lived up there, and then they come back down to Big Reedy. And they lived, I know one of the places that they lived, there should be an old house. I don't know if y'all remember this or not, but it's really close to where Evelyn and Nick and that house there where Jonathan and Aaron lived. There used to be an old house set up there on the hill. Do you remember that, Kyle?
I do remember
Across
that.
the road?
It's on the same side. It's on the same side of the road.
Oh, okay.
And that's where they were living when Brian was born. But they bought that place there. I believe it was Kent Woosley maybe that owned it where we grew up. That little house that sits there on a knob.
The one that's out by the road.
Out by the road, yeah. They bought that when Brian was just a little baby, and that's where we all was raised, right there in that house. And but Dad, he worked there at Sunfish. To my knowledge, he after he come back, he worked there till I think it was about the 68, 69 school year. He went to the high school for a couple years, and then he went back to Sunfish.
Did he ever teach any core classes, or was he,
He
all?
taught some math.
Okay.
Yeah, he
By the time we got to Kai Rock,
He was in the gym.
Yeah,
He was coach.
84, 85, he was the PE teacher.
Oh yeah, he was
And so,
primarily PE, I think.
last time I saw him, I referred to him as coach, and I think 95% of the people who talked to him, he was coach. He
Yeah.
coached multiple generations. Or
Yeah.
He retired my third grade year, I'm pretty sure.
Well, he left the school and went to the bus garage.
I shouldn't say retire, but quit teaching.
Yeah.
Quit
he
physical education, went over there.
Back in those days, school teachers, they didn't make a lot of money. Of course, that's relatively speaking. We talk about prices on stuff all the time, but they didn't make a whole lot of money. I mean, Dad, he worked jobs in the summertime.
yeah, you had to have a couple jobs.
You had to have some other jobs. I know all kinds of teachers that used to work at the National Park Service.
Well,
They'd be guides.
I
over
remember
there
getting
and stuff.
pulled over one time on the lake with Dad when I was a kid, and Mr. Cassidy, what's his first? Donald Cassidy was the game warden.
Oh, game
or
warden.
water patrol.
Uh-huh.
And thinking, I sit over, and of course I'd been in trouble a little bit at school. I just sit over and kept my head down, let Dad take it.
Yeah.
You got a ticket and a report.
Yeah.
Now, I'll say this, Dad. Now he wasn't a person that really enjoyed reading a lot because he just got off kind of a bad start. He wasn't a bad reader, but he wasn't a great reader. But I can remember when I was a kid, if we had Sunday school or something, he'd be trying to read the Bible before church, and some of the Bible's really difficult reading.
Yeah,
Y'all know that. But
vowels and
Mom
arts.
would help him. But now he prided himself in math. Now, so I remember this one time we was kids because Jeremy asked if he taught other subjects. He did teach some math. I think maybe it was Jason was in high school, and you get into high school and they start throwing letters in there, in math. And but he was having a little trouble
Never
with
made
some
sense.
algebra, and I think Dad was here. Let me see that kind of thing, and I reckon he got to checking it out, and I don't know about this. It's got. You better let Joe read a little bit of this.
He didn't throw a McKelvey confound letters in this
No,
math.
Dad was more of a Gonfound guy. My grandpa was more of a confound guy. Yeah, Dad was Gonfound. Confound. I don't know about this, Joe Reddy. You'll have to take this over.
But one thing about Charles, he was a very fair person, and I think you've got a good story you've told me about that. About there was some kids acting up in the class you was in, and he might have yoked a few of them up, and while he's at it, just got you too, and you wasn't involved.
Oh yeah, he would do that. Now, Dad would be overly, he didn't want anybody to think he was making, would come to his own kids.
He didn't want to think he'd playing favorites.
No, he
giving
was
anybody
totally
slack.
not like that. Yeah, Kai Rock, when you're a kid, there's two things. There was two forms of just humiliation for punishment. One of them was standing on the wall. I don't know if you've
I
ever
forgot about
I don't know if you've
standing
ever
on the
stood
wall.
on the wall. I made it K through 5 without ever standing on the wall, but I
Stood on
did.
the wall, unfortunately.
I've been there.
I did. When in PE, if you misbehaved or did something wrong, Dad'd make you hug the post.
Hug the pole.
Hug the post.
I've
I
done that
forgot
too.
about that. Yep, I've done that.
So hugging the post was just insulting. Gosh, it was awful. And so yeah, I was in there with some, those names will remain. I won't say their names.
We'll protect the innocent.
We'll protect the innocent, yeah. But they had misbehaved and did some stuff, and of course, Dad back in those days, you could still bust their ends and stuff, and Dad he kind of got on them, and I was just kind of over there, and you get over there and you do it. He made me hug the post too. I've had, and Dad was kind of guy. I've gotten in trouble at school before. I got a spanking at school before. And but usually what would happen was they would take me to Dad, and Dad would spank.
Oh yeah.
He can make a believer out of you. And if you got in trouble at school, you were getting one when you got home too.
You said Johnny Pete Vincent a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
He's the only person that ever spanked me in school.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember what I did to get the walk to the office, but I ended up in the office. And the janitor at the time, he was an Alford. When
Steve.
I was
Steve
getting
Alford.
up there.
Not the basketball player.
No. when I get up there, Steve's sitting in the office smoking because they still smoked in the schools at the time, and he had his pants leg rolled up, and he was thumping them ashes in the pants leg. I'll never forget that. And so I go on back there, and Johnny Pete spanked me. That's the only one I ever got was from Johnny Pete.
Yeah.
But I did hug the pole, and I did stand on the wall.
Yeah, that was.
And I did. Woody had us write, me and Jonathan Shields and a couple of us, Scott. I think we wrote like 4,500 2-line sentences one time.
Oh my gosh!
So
I had to put my nose in a ring one time.
yeah, I think I'd done that.
That's Mr. Webb's room, 6th grade.
I did
science.
that. I used to do that to my kids.
Oh, did you really?
Oh yeah, they'd be into something. I'd draw a circle on the refrigerator.
Yeah,
Put your nose in there. Yeah.
Tiptoe.
Yeah, oh yeah.
you know it's when I knew growing up with Dad. I mean, there was a lot of people. There were people come to our house a lot, and they just kids he'd had in school, and they had somebody would work in tobacco for us, and they weren't the crew that stripped tobacco. That was always Autry's bunch. They always helped us strip tobacco, and but there would be people, and they were just real fond of him. I knew they loved him and stuff, and but Dad, he I don't know how to describe the relationship that he had with him, but outside they just loved him, and
I think sometimes Charles was a father figure to something that probably needed it.
yeah, well, probably so, really, and that was just something we just kind of just grew accustomed to. You just shared Dad with everybody. But I remember, we was talking about spanking a minute ago. I remember this story, and I'm assuming this is a true story. There's people around who can verify this one, but he's a rah-rahish kind of guy too. So, and Dad, when he was at Sunfish, Sunfish was the smallest of the schools. Really, I guess Lincoln was pretty small too. But now Dad, he loved to compete, and so they was getting ready for a big ball game over there one time, and they was gonna have a little pep rally down there in the gym, and Dad, he had them all fired up, everybody's going to get up and it's going to go purchase, all through this. And apparently what happened was, there was the team was out there and the kids is all cheering. Of course, it's probably kindergarten through 8th grade. And Big Charlie Hayes sitting over there, and he wasn't going to get up and cheer. And Dad said, I reckon Dad just, get going. He looked over there and said, "Hey, Hayes, get up from there. You're going to help us cheer. Let's go now." And they was going through all of it. Charlie just sitting there, I reckon. He walked over there by him and said, "Hey, big boy," said, "you're going to get up from there. I'm going to bust that hind end if you don't cheer." And I don't know if Charlie ever did or not, but the story I heard was Dad busted his hind end because he wouldn't get up and participate in the pep rally. Now, I don't know. I've heard that. Now, you could probably check with, like, Rockman or maybe Steve French would have.
Was Charlie taller than him at the time?
Yeah, I don't know, man. But Rockman or Steve French and them, they're all in the same age group, so they could probably verify that story. But yeah, now Dad, he couldn't have taught in today's.
He wouldn't have been able to stud it.
He wouldn't have been able to stud it.
When I was, I remember when I went to kindergarten at Kyrock. I was the only child, and I was mama's boy, homebody. I didn't have siblings to hang out with, and I remember being scared to go to school. But from being in the store down here and your dad coming in and just being around him, I remember he was the safe person to go into.
Yeah.
He'd be out there, you'd be getting off the bus, and he'd
familiar.
He was familiar.
Yeah.
He would give you a hug. You'd
Sure.
see him, you could
Yeah.
hug him, and he was always such a giant to me because
Yeah.
I mean, you're tall. How tall are you? 6'3"?
Yeah, about 6'3".
Yeah, I mean, he was tall like
Gravity's
that.
pulling me down a little bit. I don't know if I'm sorry 6'3".
I like to say I'm spreading out.
Hey, I tell you something that I just thought of. When I was in 5th grade, Jeremy was starting school.
Yeah.
At Kyrock.
I remember you coming into my kindergarten class, you and Stephen Smith's sister, Leslie.
Yep. And I remember this. There was a boy that was in Jeremy's grade, and he's a great big old kid. He was Jesse Whitaker. And he would cry.
I know exactly what you're going to tell.
He would cry in the mornings, and Dad would have to go get him off the bus.
I'd say Jesse Whitaker still cries. I hope he listens to this.
Dad would literally carry him in.
Yeah, I
and
remember
get him
that.
calmed down. You remember that?
I remember
He'd
that,
get him
yeah.
calmed down. But he was a big old guy, but he was, there I guess was just something about him. I don't know, and I guess he was just a loving person. That the kids just loved him. They gravitated toward him.
He definitely always had our respect our whole life, but he was familiar, and he had that he could make you feel like you were okay.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a good person.
Yeah. He had very special qualities. Being a real common guy, he did. He had some really good qualities. But man, I tell you, he would always tell us, professionally speaking, the best years of his life were right over there.
That Sunfish.
Oh man, he loved it over there. They were people have I don't know. I think it was maybe Bobby Alford and I might have been Darnell Say. There was a bunch of them that was all in they had a Sunfish pep rally. It was back when you had the VHS video cameras. Well, Dad, he got fired up over his thing. We're gonna get them all out there. And
Was Charlie there?
who's that?
Was Big Charlie?
No, I don't think Big Charlie came. He wasn't there. But they had it at the middle school over there, in what used to be the middle school. We're there. I guess it's a 5-6 center now.
Yeah.
And I was probably on VHS somewhere. I need to get it. We need to get that Jamie Carnes or somebody to get on that. But he just was all in. And he was a Brownsville Bulldog growing up. But now his life, he was a perch. And he loved that black and gold. Yeah. He'd get them fired up, and he's just the kind of a rah-rah-ish kind of guy, Yeah.
Well, I think you was talking about his competitive spirit, and I think probably anybody that's grown up in rural Kentucky or a rural state, you've got the town kids, if you want to say that.
Oh, yeah.
You've got, of course, for us, it would have been Brownsville. You got the town kids, and then you got the country kids over here, and the country kids aren't supposed to beat the town kids. But Coach, he always had teams that...
Yeah, he loved to compete.
They won, and they competed and they won, and they were good teams.
Yeah.
And some of the best players that you hear talk about, or that I hear talk about, was from some of this Sunfish bunch over here. You mentioned the Keys earlier. Those guys were athletes.
Yeah. There was those guys. He competed.
The Hayeses.
Yeah.
Kevin was as good a player. I think probably that one of the best players ever come through Edmonson County.
Yeah.
And I've heard Coach say that Kevin started out going to St. John's, and he'd watch him dribble. He'd dribble all the way to school and all the way back, both hands.
Yeah.
Coach said, I had my eye on him.
Yeah.
I just want to get him over to Sunfish.
Yeah, I guess I saw Christmas pictures. Kevin still comes to your all's Christmas or something. I mean, he's part of the family.
Well, yeah, he's Kevin. When it's Kevin Hayes, who we're talking about. Kevin was, I guess, Marie and Otis's youngest boy,
Right.
youngest child. And so I don't know if Mom and Dad, when they picked out a name for me, my mom liked Daniel, my dad liked Kevin. I don't know if he liked it. I don't know, because of Kevin. I don't know where he got it, but when I was a kid, Hayes would bring me a present every year at Christmas because he'd bring me a little teddy bear. He was living in Georgia, I believe, Columbus, Georgia, or somewhere at that time,
doing construction.
You were his namesake. He had to.
Yeah, and. So Hayes, in about 88 or 89, Hayes and his wife at that time decided to move back up here. And so Mom and Dad they'd built that other house out there, that berm house, and that other house was empty. And so he rented there off Mom and Dad for several years. And he loved my dad so much. I mean, he'd bring him Father's Day stuff. And he loved, obviously Otis is his father.
Right.
But now he just loved Dad because he had a big influence in his life. But yeah, that's a true story what Kyle's talking about there a minute ago. When he come back to Sunfish in early 70s there, I'm not for sure, and you guys probably know the year that St. John's, when the kids started going over there to Sunfish.
What Dale tell us?
It was Big
71,
Charlie. It was
72.
Big Charlie times, wasn't it? When he won the last ones.
Well, Dale told us the last 71 or
71 or 72, something like that. But apparently, Dad, he'd see Kevin, he dribbling that basketball, and he said, "Hey, that kid's probably got some talent. And I want to get him over here and play." And he had several of them like that. I said something about Steve there a minute ago. I'll tell you another one.
Do you know the pension story? You know that one?
No, there's a biting one.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah,
Maybe it's mine. That'd even be
was.
better.
It was. They were. So I think this was when Steve was maybe in, I don't know if it's in 7th or 8th grade, but Steve played basketball for my dad, and they were playing, I believe, in the county tournament, which was a big deal. That's Brownsville and Kyrock, and So they're over there, and it's nip and tuck, It's just nip and tuck, and there was something happened out there, and the whistle blown. And Steve was in a group with John Simon, lives up the road here, and Ricky Souders that lived down toward Round Hill was a good player, and Harold Stewart's boy Mike lived up the road, and then Charlie Logston was on that team too, and Charlie lives over at Cleveland now. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, they're playing, and there's a whistle blows, and they bring the officials together, and apparently a boy on Brownsville's team, he's a Renfro, I believe, he told the officials that Steve had bit him. And Dad said, I pulled Steve over and said, what? No, he said, I didn't bite. How am I going to bite him? Dad said, I believed him. He said, I believed him. He said, now Steve would play and cry. Dad said he'd cry and play, just gets into it. But he said, I asked him.
Tenacious.
He said, I asked him, said, Steve, did you? He said, no, I didn't bite him. He said, no, I believe I told that official. Said, he didn't bite him. Said, let him play. But, officials accused Steve of biting someone during a basketball game in the county tournament.
Which way would you bet?
I
would bet he did, yeah.
I was fixing to say.
As soon as I heard that story,
if I'd have been Charles, I don't believe I'd have bought that.
There's no conclusive video evidence of it.
Well, it was a lot easier to believe when you were the coach of him.
True.
Do you know?
Well, that's the thing. Charles wanted to see you do good. And I can say that from when he trained me to drive a bus, because that's probably I seen Charles mad 2 times in my life, and one time was when the woman failed me on the driving test, driving a school bus.
Oh, he got hot.
And
he got hot.
Oh my goodness! On the way back, which we were testing at the time in Scottsville, and on the way back, that Gonfound woman just costing us money down here. She just wants to get an extra test in. You can drive better than she can, you know. Which Charles, it was funny too, because when I started training, there were 3 or 4 others training with me, and they were all women. And we go over to the old sewing factory parking lot.
Yeah. He's got
a course set up, and he tells us how to run the bus through it. And so he tells me, he says, I want you to be the first one to run through it, and they're going to ride with you. And he said, I'm going to just stand out here in the parking lot and watch you.
How old were you then?
Okay. 20, 21-ish, 22. And so
was it timed?
No, it wasn't.
Because I could just imagine you're going.
No, but okay. Listen,
I'm sorry.
So,
I've seen Bill Hay.
So Charles tells me they all get on the bus, and Charles tells me, he said, "All right, big boy, I want you to show them how to do it. I want you to bring that bus around through there." And I said,
"Pep talking you."
That's all.
You're fired up.
All I need to know.
Rally.
So we go through whatever he had set up, cones and this and that. And one of the things he'd always have you do is there was a pothole at the edge of the parking lot, and he wanted you to run off in that, like, pretend like you was dropping off show road and bring it back on. When I come around through there, I'm probably doing 40. And I drop her off and bring her on. I mean, I got the old bus leaning, and all them others that's in there with me are white knuckling the fronts of the seats. And Charles is out there in the parking lot dying laughing. So yeah. The second time I ever seen him mad, or maybe that was the second time, and this was the first time, but there was a deputy sheriff stepped out in front of us, and we had a load of cattle on. I was hauling cattle for him, and we were in a school zone, and we were easing through there, and he stepped to the side to let traffic through, and then decided to step between us and the car in front of us, and I had to slam on the brakes, and the calves hit the front of the trailer. And I literally thought, I mean, Charles talked pretty rough to this deputy sheriff sitting in the passenger side of my truck. I thought, where were you at? We're going to both go to jail. I'm not going to say.
Not going to say which deputy sheriff.
Were you in Edmonson?
No, we were not in Edmonson County.
Oh, okay. I started to say if he was in Edmonson County,
No,
probably
we were not in Edmonson County.
School, the deputy probably was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, coach."
No, we were not in Edmonson County, but it was you give some of these guys a Gonfound gun and a badge, and they think they're something else.
Yeah, he had a moment.
Yeah. And but that's the 2 times I've seen Charles mad.
I've seen him mad more than twice.
I'd say.
I've seen him mad more. Yeah. He could, like I said a while ago, when he got mad,
Kevin, do you know the story about Brian and Jason helping him check the well, about being head and shoulders deep in your well house? Or
no,
have you ever heard that one? Maybe
no. You tell it.
So I've heard this. Of course, I wasn't around Coach at home just a whole lot, a little bit, but I work with Kevin, work with Jason, so I hear some coach
Now,
stories.
Jason's Kevin's brother. We
Jason-
probably need to give a rundown
sure,
for people that don't
sure.
know.
That's true.
There's Brian, Jason.
Brian's the oldest.
Yeah, Brian's my oldest brother. I guess Brian now is 50, probably 55. Jason's there's 2 years difference between them. Jason's 53, and I'm 49, and I have a younger sister. It's about 16, 17 months younger than me, and her name's Sarah. And she always claims that nobody knows who she is. So, Sarah, if you listen to this, I'm giving you a shout out there, gal.
Well, I'm going to tell you, when I was a freshman in high school, she was a senior. And I don't remember where our paths crossed, but I had no idea you all had a younger sister. And she told me that, and I remember just thinking I was blown away that you all had a younger sister.
Yeah.
Because I knew Coach, and then Brian, of course. Brian was the basketball star. I remember when I was a little dribbler. But Jason helped Chris Raymer coach one of my little league baseball teams as a kid. So, but I had no idea y'all had a sister.
Yeah. Yeah, she stole my childhood. They basically put me in a one of those little old playpens and said, "Here's some toys, and you can."
We got to go race there.
I developed an incredible imagination. It's probably the reason I'm such a savant in so many things to this day.
But you were probably super excited when she brought RB around, right?
Yes, RB.
Her husband RB, he's something.
He's great.
Yeah, he's great.
RB
guy.
is a good guy. Yeah, he's a worker, man. That
I
guy
don't know
can
when he sleeps.
That guy can do anything. But yeah, my brothers. Now I'll say this: when we was kids, there was lots to do. Dad was not that person you just sit around. Now, Jason and Brian would tell you, they and I'm going to agree with them. They probably did a lot more growing up than even what Sarah and I did. There's 4 years difference in Jason and I. Brian and Jason are 2 years apart, 4 years, and then me and Sarah are close together. But they did. Now we worked.
Charles raised tobacco plum up until y'all was already gone from the house because
Yeah.
I can remember going and helping in it.
He didn't. He would say, "I'm not going to hire help. I've raised it." And so you.
Well, that's what his parents
everything's
did.
competitive. Everything's competitive when you're in tobacco. If you're got a,
Who cut the row the fastest?
yes, if you got 8 or 9 rows here, and Jason and Brian are over here on one side, and we're on this side. Who can get to the end fast enough? Dad'd say, "Come on, let's wide eye 'em. Let's pour it on." I remember he used to use this line. Said, "I don't care." He said, "I don't care if I'm playing Mumbly Peg. I want to win." And I was like, "What is Mumbly Peg?
What is that?
What is that game?"
I bet there's people listening that don't know what Mumbly Peg is.
Well, I'm going to sit here and say I don't know what it is.
You don't know what Mumbly
I've
Peg
never
is?
heard
You
that
play
term.
it with a pocket knife.
Knife game.
Yeah, you play with a pocket knife. And I don't know the full rules and details, but I've heard enough about it. So, like, you try to do moves and stick the knife in the ground, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And then if you stick it in the ground, you get to drive a peg in the ground, and the other person has to bite it out, like pull it out. You got your face in the dust, pretty much. Yeah.
Maybe we need to have a round of it out here. And
It was pre-Facebook also.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's what you do.
I think it was
That's what
pre-
you do.
It was
You
pre
do.
a lot of
Can I-
games.
It was
Can I
pre
Google
Atari.
that? I'll Google that.
Yeah, you could.
All the kids had pocket knives, and that's a game they had.
Yeah,
So.
everything's competitive.
Yeah.
You're trying to outdo the other one, but I don't know this story. I don't know if I remember this story. I might
Well,
remember it when Kyle.
I was going to
tells
say,
it.
I work with Kevin and Jason, so I hear some coach stories every now and again. And from what I was told, Coach was working on the well, which if back in the day you had well houses.
Yeah, pre-county water.
Pre-county water, you had well houses, kind of a square, probably made out of block. The well's down in there. And he just had Jason on one side, Brian on the other, hold it up, just lift the lid,
up.
and he's going to put his head and shoulders down there and do something fairly quickly, rather than having to get the lid and take it all the way
It
off.
was heavy.
Yeah, pretty heavy lid. Take it all the way off, and then have to set it back on there. And from what I was told, they got this lid up, and Brian starts getting weak. And he looks over at Jason and said, "I can't hold it." And Jason's like, "Okay, we'll tell." And about that time, he drops it.
With Coach in it.
With Coach in it, and it was like a TV show. The way the person that told me said like a leg and an arm went up at the same time out from underneath that well house. And so Jason's trying to get the well in it, and Coach is trying to get it off of there. And Coach is like, "What happened?" He says, "Brian dropped the lid."
Yeah.
And I think he was pretty upset about that, from what I understand.
Well, we, you know, you have a tendency sometimes when you're a kid and you're from, there's several of you, you know it's coming. Somebody's going to get it. You'll throw somebody under the bus to not be the one. Yeah.
So how did the fox pen come into play? You know, when that's how I remember Coach a lot is his fox pen and his coyotes in there,
his hounds,
and his
he was a houndsman.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he loved them fox hounds. He, Dad, he fox hunted. You know, that was just something that people did. There's not many people do that anymore.
I don't know if I know anybody.
Jason,
anymore.
He's about the only one.
Oh, is he still?
Yeah, Jason. And there's a few. He's got some friends that from different counties that come around and they hunt some. But Jason's got his own pen over there now. Over there it's actually on his farm. It runs into Butler County. It's a smaller pen, but Dad, he hunted outside, and things were beginning to change in the early '80s. You couldn't have your dogs run loose in today's world. Somebody'd call the animal control on you.
Yeah, you'd be going to humane society and picking them up every other day.
But back in those days, Dad would have his, S4 tracking collars, anything like that. Yeah. His tracking collar was a collar that had his telephone number, 286-8657.
Yep.
Or if I heard Jason
Charles Alexander.
sometimes that he'd lay his coat out or just something like that from his person that them dogs would
they'd come back to and lay down.
Yeah.
And
he had the old foxhorn, he'd go out for his. Of course, I remember going over to DC boats and places when we was kids where he used to hunt over in there. He'd get that horn. That was his thing.
He had his own jingle.
Oh yeah, even when
the dogs know.
Even when Dad's funeral, when we were up there. When we were up there at the cemetery,
is he buried at Alexander Cemetery on the hill?
Yep, Jason blew the horn.
Yeah,
really?
I remember that.
You was up there, wasn't you, bub?
Yeah.
But the fox pen was, it was like a lot of things. We had a great neighbor in Roy White, and Roy and Dad were friends. Went back to when they were young and playing ball against each other. Roy was kind of star over here at Sunfish back in the late 50s and early 60s, and Roy very successful, and he had bought that farm there next to Mom and Dad, and Dad, I don't know if Dad how he approached him or whatever, but there'd be people come in there. Roy said, "Yeah, we'll fence this off. We'll put a good fence around it and stuff," and remnants of that fence are still.
You can go see it today.
You can go see it today.
How many 100 acres did they have fenced in?
Oh, well, my dad and mom's farm was about 106 acres, but Kyle, what'd you say, about 80 of it probably was in there?
I'd say, yeah.
And then Roy had probably
250?
250.
Yeah.
It was big.
And so when they started it was mainly foxes, I'm guessing. And
yeah, there was I can remember there's videos. Brad would remember that. They had there was a pen that run up there behind Randy Harden's and behind where Slate Bank Church is now. It was like a little 10-acre pen. They had some silver foxes. I don't know where they'd come from, but that's what they looked like. They were silver in color, kind of bluish. It was amazing. You could go up there and you could turn some like pups loose, and you could watch those foxes trick those young dogs.
Slides of fox.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
But they had, they used different game in there for a while, and then yeah.
Well, when I was he'd had that Honda 4-wheeler, and it wasn't that old. He called me, wanted me to come over to look at it, and I went over there, and it had an odometer on it, and I flipped it on, and I think that thing had 20,000 miles on it, which is like 200,000 on a car.
Yeah.
I said, Charles, how did this thing get? And he would ride that fence every day back there.
Yeah. Sometimes multiple times a day.
Yeah. See, he retired. Dad retired at about 94. By the time Sarah got out of school, I think. But he worked those extended days. He trained bus drivers, worked for the school system. That's how, all of you guys have had a relationship with Dad in some way. Of course, Brandon worked, as a bus driver, and he baled hay for us for years, and just whatever. It was my dad as his mind got bad later on in life. He loved to watch Brandon. He'd sit out there on the porch. He'd watch you bale, and Jeremy has done. He has worked miracles on those 4-wheelers and stuff, because Dad could he got there on last, before he got where he couldn't. he could tear up things pretty good. But he just wanted to be out and doing stuff. But that fox pen, he really enjoyed it, and that was something that of course Big Neil was real instrumental, and Leck, I tell a funny story. Lester Vincent and Big Neil, there was a Jeep. Roy bought a Jeep.
I remember.
And we were way back in there on that farm one day. It was hot. Oh, it was hot. And we had run out of Cokes. And there was just water left. Lester and Catherine's boy, Greg, who's probably 54, 55-year-old now, I'd say.
Yeah.
Greg was back there. And Greg could drink a case of Cokes like nobody's business. RC's, really. We were back there one day, and it was so hot. And all the RC's is gone, and Greg poured out every bit of the ice water. He poured it out right there in the middle of the woods. He said, now we'll ride in that Jeep.
He was wanting to ride the Jeep.
Hazard.
Yeah, he was wanting to ride the Jeep.
So Big Neil, man, he brought him out there, and man, he's a cutting didos out in that field. Of course, that's Greg. He just loved it, you know. But yeah, Big Neil and Leck, my dad, and Roy enabled it. And Roy, just an unbelievable neighbor. Of course, Roy's, and Neil's still alive too, but man, Roy was just a tremendous neighbor to my mom and dad. What was Roy's was yours if you wanted to use it.
Yeah, that's the best kind of neighbor to have.
Oh my gosh, he was just great. And, of course, I grew up there, and Brad he's my best buddy growing up, and he's my neighbor. We've been all over at Fox Pen, I remember that little I guess a little dune buggy or whatever that thing was. Brad, he just poured on it, son. He'd lay that thing to the floor. Of course, back then Brad was the big guy and I was the little guy. And I'm just holding on for dear life. But yeah, man, I've been all over that place. Of course, Josh and Ashley own that now.
Yeah.
And it's a really good old cattle farm.
Yeah.
It was but yeah, them foxes and coyotes and stuff. He really got to enjoy his retirement. He really did.
That's good. We when I was over there. Went over and look at his four-wheeler, pick it up or something one time. He said, now this thing's got to run. He said, if I get back there and that thing quits, he said, those coyotes may eat me. And I said, well, thanks for putting some pressure on me. And so he said, yeah, watch this. And he went to hollering, and coyotes just came from everywhere there behind that house. I remember there were like 8 or 10 of them, at the time. It's a big thing to see coyotes somewhere.
Kevin, do you remember when he wrecked that four-wheeler when he had the...
Oh, yeah, I was going to tell that one. So, Jeremy used to work up there for Gene Winston at the slaughterhouse.
And Jean's Charles' sister.
She's my dad's baby sister. And, of course, there was Gene and Winston. Marion's up there, I guess, at that time.
Jill.
Mario Andretti. That's what Dad called him, Andretti. You don't even know
we could do episode after episode on Marion.
Yeah, Marion Blankenship was his own miniseries, I would say. But Dad would go up there and whatever was being slaughtered, Dad'd take it and they'd feed them coyotes. Scraps.
Right, yeah.
Whatever. So, this was like the summer, it was the summer of 1997 because I was in Chicago. My last semester before I graduated college, and one of my dad's other sisters, she had a daughter that lived up there, and I spent the summer up there with them. So, I didn't witness this, but I know this to be true. So Dad had on the front of his four-wheeler, and that four-wheeler is still over there, Jeremy,
really?
by the way.
You've done a great job.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. Scott Avery, I think Scott may have worked on that thing some too.
Yeah, me and Scott had called and said, did you do this, that? Yeah. We put the case, he broke the case on the engine on that four-wheeler. I'm like, Charles, how do you do it? I
don't know. God found, I don't know. But anyway, he has a bunch of scraps on the front of this. And Dad he'd bungee strap, or he'd strap everything
Didn't
down.
Didn't it have a big basket or something?
Yeah. And it had guts all in it. So he's back there somewhere, and he's feeding some stuff, and he has, I don't know if he hit a stump or whatever. He turns the four-wheeler over, and it did cut him up a little bit. It addled him. And four-wheeler's turn, he can't get it back over, and he's having to walk. He walks back to the house. He has no idea what he looks like. And there was a man that lives over in the, I'm not going to say that man's name, but he lives over there on 1075. And he happened to be there. And to see, he stopped in there. My sister was there. My mom was there. And Dad, here he comes about half addled walking down through there, and he has got a liver right here on his head. And I reckon his glasses is busted up. And my sister told me, she said, I thought his brains were coming out of his head. She said it was unbelievable. Thank God it was just some carcass's guts there. But yeah, man, I tell you what, those guys that worked on his 4-wheeler, they was just unbelievable. But yeah, he could put the miles on. He would go around that thing. That pin went all the way up there close to Jerry Shields's, back in there right behind where Brad and Angel live.
Well, the terrain's pretty rough. If
It's
you're going to check
hills.
that fence.
It's hills, yeah.
I think you got into a little of that a couple years ago, didn't you,
It's very
Kev?
wet. Yeah,
Didn't you have a pretty good?
Yeah. Well, what happened
Four-wheeler
was
story?
my boy, my oldest son, he had turned the 4-wheeler over, and I hadn't got them handlebars back up as high as what they should have been.
I remember. I
So
think
I'm
you called
coming-
me on that.
I'm coming down the hill. Down there, it's wet. Gosh, there's some spots back there. It's wet, and I'm trying to cut it. And when I did, my knee hits the accelerator, and I just jump, and I hit that 8-foot tall fence. Probably, I don't know. It's probably 3 or 4 feet off the ground.
That's what you said. It
Boom!
just went
I
airborne.
Went airborne, and man, it's pretty treacherous back in there. You know, Josh has cleared out that spot going up a hill right in there. You're not far from that pin back in there in some of those areas. But yeah, that was, man, I tell you what, he really, like I said, my mom and I, we talked about this the other day. He really got to enjoy his retirement.
That's good.
He got to enjoy his retirement
anybody
before he got
deserved it,
that
he did.
before he got that old dementia.
That pin probably kept him active for a long,
Yeah.
You were talking about Josh clearing that out back there. I went over there. It's been a couple of years ago when they were hauling hay. Mm-hmm. He comes in with a semi with a flatbed trailer. I don't know how many bales he can get on there. What do you think, Brandon? 20?
I don't even know.
But he had hay on there and it had stacked on. And he said, "You want to ride with me to unload this?" We were going somewhere. He said, "We'll come back and go." I said, "Yeah." So he said, "Just climb in over there." So I go open the passenger side door on this semi, and there's a plastic lawn chair in there for a seat. And I said, "Is this safe?" He said, "Well, yeah." I said, "Gig rode to Alabama in that chair." Okay. So I sit down in it, and we take off. Of course, he's got a pretty good road back through there, right? We take off, and we go out through there, and we drop over that hill to come in kind of in behind you all. And we get to the bottom of that hill, and there's a creek down there to cross. And I bet we were running 40 when we crossed that creek. And I mean, I looked one time, and I was up on one leg in that chair in that semi trying to hang on. I said, "Good gosh, boys, you gonna kill somebody?" Nah, it'll be okay.
Coming from the guy that took me up to Low Ridge,
Hey, you were in a sleeper, though. You had a mattress
You
and
were in a
everything back
sleeper.
there.
I
would
feel
have
like
to
the
say
terrain
that.
was probably worse, though.
Yeah, but you were in
And
you
we
were
were
in a
probably
paddock.
running faster.
I guarantee we was running faster than 40.
Well, we wasn't the first time, but we spun out the first time, so we had to back up and regroup.
It may be
Oh,
the
yeah.
second or
Yeah,
third,
yeah,
but
if
I
you-
think by the fourth time we made it.
No, we made it the second time.
Did we?
You
Sunfish-
wasn't taking no chances.
Sunfish logic, if you can't make it, just go faster.
It's all about momentum.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's all about momentum.
That's what that old boy in that one movie used to have said. Well, it ain't the tires or the 4-wheeler, it's the momentum. If
Yeah.
you hit it running 100, you're going to make it across.
Yeah, so Kevin, my stepdad, had semis. And
Hold on. I'm going to back up on this one. His stepdad had semis that the poor drivers were having to drive to Chicago and back through the week. But Jeremy's servicing them and stress testing them on the weekends.
so I get one out one night, come down here, get Brandon. We're out riding around in it. We stop and get Kyle. I don't remember if we picked you up at your house or what.
Yeah.
But, semis only got 2 seats most of the time. But it had a sleeper for him to sit back in. So we take off and we stop by mine and Brandon's mutual cousin's house. And he had a semi sitting there, and we saw, stopped to see if he wanted to race. He didn't, so we did a little Pro Street burnout in front of his house in the semi. And we take off and we go up to Low Ridge.
I think this was the same semi that before we got Kyle, we went to Corner Market and we're riding down the road. And you said, "I've always wondered what it would do if you was running this fast and pulled the park brake." And I said, "Really?" And you said, "Yeah." And reach over and pulled the park brake and we're running 50.
Yeah, and it stopped.
Well, it will hop a
It
little
will
bit.
hop, but it stopped. I mean, they do work at that speed. We take off up those S curves, going up to Low Ridge, and we make it about halfway up that old steep hill, and it spins that truck out. And this is a full-size semi with a condo sleeper on it. I mean, it's a big truck.
Yeah, plenty of room to bounce around in the
Stand up-
sleeper. I'll
stand up-
vouch for that.
Stand up sleeper, and on his second pass, Kyle is hitting the top with his head.
I turned around and looked at Kyle, and I remember turning around and looking and had to look up to see him. He was levitating.
Have you seen that train? And that train and they put the astronauts through where it's like zero gravity. That's what it was for just a few minutes.
Hey, but we made it, didn't we?
We made it.
We get up there, and there's
And
a
survive.
sharp right-hand curve, and Jeremy just goes straight, and there's a field there with shoemates in it, and we're mowing them down. They're going over the top of the truck.
We had about 35, but so we get back. I don't remember what we shot a donut. Dad was living up there at the time. We shot a donut in front of his house. We come back and drop Kyle off. We parked that truck up there at the shop. Next day, that driver come up, called me. He said, "What is all that?" They was shoemakers, looked like you just a forest under and hanging out from under. Old poor old driver had to get under there and dig them all out.
And then drive us to Chicago.
Yeah. He was just testing it, though, right?
Everything was seated in, right?
Stress test.
Stress testing it.
So
If it's going to break
Ben's,
down, you wanted to do it here close to home.
Yeah.
You know what
Ben's,
that
you're
ha-
on the Volvo semi kick. Tell the one about catching the one on fire.
I don't remember what I was cutting off of that.
Slack adjuster.
Yeah, had a slack adjuster. I was
You'd
cutting
had
off.
a small fuel spill out there around it.
Yeah, we had a truck that was wrecked, and it was full of fuel. And so I had that Dodge truck, and so I had me a pump rigged up. I'd go out there, and I'd stick it in that tank and stick it in my truck and just turn it on and let it fill up. Well, they don't automatically kick off. So I may have pumped about 100 gallons of fuel out on the ground. So I go out there.
It's rain.
Yeah, and just to be fair, I was like 20 years old when all this happened, right?
True.
I mean, I've learned a lot in the
Yes,
last 23 years.
But it's rain, so all the fuel's coming back to the top of the
Right,
ground.
it's top of the ground, and it's a big spot. And so I take a torch, going to cut a slack adjuster
Lots of
off.
dead grass.
Yeah. And when I get that metal hot and I take and blow that, it hits that ground, and it is a fire. And that truck is sitting right in the middle of it. Now, this truck, really, I mean, they knocked the hood off of it, and later on we got it on the road, I think. We put it back on the road, but anyhow, it was a fire. So I think, I can't let this truck burn down. And so I get one of the other trucks, and I get back going backwards to it, and I just back into it to push it out of the fire. Well, it pushes it backwards against the old berm there in that shop. And when I go to pull back forward, they were locked together. And so now the good truck that there's nothing wrong with is sitting
in the
amongst
fire.
all these flames, and it won't go anywhere. And so I finally yank around, jerk around, and I got it out, but it may have singed some wires and burnt some grease off the bottom of it.
I think you had to work on taillights for half the night to get it ready to go the next morning. But
Yeah. Yeah, needless to say, he's not in the trucking business anymore.
I can't imagine with such a good.
But I mean, just looking back
mechanic.
at me, it was fun, but it was just young and stupid, right? But you're talking about Kevin Hayes and your dad. You know, I think a lot of us find, you know, almost people to kind of latch onto. You said Jill and Marion. You know, from 16 on, they raised me. I mean, that I think more of them than I do. You know, half my family, I guess. I mean, I've still my dad's side of the family. I've still got a lot of good family there. I don't get to see them a lot anymore, but I mean, I talk to Jill probably weekly, and see Marion a lot. And I mean, we see them at Christmas and stuff. And I mean, I tell them all, if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you all. I mean, I ain't no telling where I'd be. But they kept me on the straight and narrow. Now, I had a lot of good fun with him. Marion, man, whew. I ain't gonna tell. I can't tell any stories. We're gonna try to keep this G rated over here, but he's a mess.
He's a character.
Yeah.
I when growing up, and I said something a while ago about, you know, we raised back and stuff, and that's the way my dad, his brothers and of course Aunt Jean was his youngest sister. You know, back in those days, if somebody needed help, you just went and helped them.
Right.
And if you run out of tobacco plants, you went up there and you got what you called. But they jump in there and help. Winston and Gene were great.
Yeah,
they're great.
Yeah, Winston,
They were great. Winston was a worker, man.
Yeah, that
Gene
business was an asset to our community also.
Right, yeah, they had
This was the last slaughterhouse in Emerson County.
Yeah, they had the processing plant up there for years, and they own a farmer's feed mill there in Litchfield. Now Jill and Marion do, after Gene and Winston have passed on, and Kyle, their son. And they've got a meat market there and stuff. But that was a big loss when that place
Absolutely,
burnt.
yeah.
And,
it was.
You know, I would work in the afternoons on their dairy farm, and then after I got done helping them milk and feed and whatever else Winston wanted to do, I would go clean the slaughterhouse. Yeah. And looking back, they were good for me to do that.
Oh yeah, Gene and Winston, of course, Jill's there was the only child that really lived. Darren, I don't know if you ever around Darren much?
So they all came to the store when I was a kid, and I've still got them from 85 through 90. What year did Darren pass away?
92.
92. John A. would order him the
baseball cards.
complete tops sets of baseball cards.
Tops.
And he would order 2 sets, and Darren got a set, and I've got a set. And I've still got mine. They're in totes.
I've still got mine too, and I would get them every year. Santa Claus, he'd bring them to me, and I remember that's something I did on Christmas Day. I'd put them. There were 792 of them. I put them in order.
Put them in order. Yep.
Box them up, never touch them again. But Darren, he's who got me started on baseball cards when I was little. I hadn't collected baseball cards in a long time, but yeah, Darren, he's been dead now for 32 years. But man, he's just like Gene and Winston. I worked up there in Slaughterhouse. Darren he's a great guy.
Yeah, I remember him as a kid. He was, like I said, he hit that and that was my connection to him, was the baseball cards. And then so if he died in 92, I started working for them in 96, I think, because I was 16.
About a sophomore, junior in high school.
Yeah, and so I'd work for them, work on the farm, and quickly became friends with Jill and Marion. And then when I went to college, Dad, I wasn't going to move down here with Dad. And then my mom and my stepdad lived in Grayson County. And I just, typical step-parent thing. It's hard to get along with as a teenager. Looking back now, 95% of it was just me being a teenager. But Jill and Marion let me live. I lived with them while I was in college. Yeah. And they were good, and still are, still to this day, great people to me. I mean,
just super hard-working people.
Oh, yeah, they never stop.
Yeah. That's just that's the mold they're cut from. Marion's a good worker too, man. Of course, he worked construction work.
Still is. He's building a factory or something in Owensboro now.
There were several. Wasn't there a few other guys from around here that worked up there at the slaughterhouse some too?
Yeah.
Did Flash work up there, maybe?
Flash, when I left and went on to, I got out of school and went on, Flash came in after me. Billy Sanders was before me.
Yeah. Jared worked up there.
Actually, I take that back. Jared may have been after me, and then Flash after him. But, so I've got a funny one. Jared and I, while Winston and Gene and Jill and Marion, when they would go on vacation, they had the dairy farm. And they milked, I think, about 50 cows. You milk twice a day. Well, somebody had to milk. Cows.
To go farm, man.
Yeah, the cows never stop, right? I mean, they have to be milked. Don't matter if you're sick or whatever.
You're married to it.
Yeah, it's a lifestyle, and so they asked me to milk. And so the first time I milked, I don't know if I told Dale or somebody in here the other day. They went and said, "I'm gonna get you some help," and I said, "Okay." So a few days later, he comes in. He said, "I got Leonard Hoobery to help you. Do you remember Leonard?" And growing up, I was scared of Leonard. He looked like a gruff old man. And so I was like, "Oh, please, no anybody else." He said, "There's nothing wrong with Leonard." Well, I spent a week with him, and me and Leonard, I just recently heard he'd passed away, and nobody really knew he'd passed away. But Leonard and I were friends after that. Mm-hmm. I was totally wrong on that one. Yeah. And so every year this would happen. Well, finally one year, Jared Childress and myself were the hired hands. And I'm telling you, there's nothing we didn't do on that farm that week. We got broke into one night. We were asleep one night. I was asleep on the floor. Jared was on the couch because we'd stay up all night. And then we'd have to be at the milk barn at 6. We're laying there. And I wake up, and somebody's on top of me just wearing my face out. I mean, open hand smacking. And I'm trying to fight him off. It's dark. And I can see in the silhouette of the light that somebody is on Jared doing the same to him. And so once we get him fought off and get the light on, it is Kyle and Josh, and they have climbed up the antenna tower, across the roof, and into upstairs window to mess with us. I mean, nothing like friends. But
which house was it?
It's that house of Jill and Mary.
Mary and Jill's house. Yeah.
So a few nights later, me and Jared are laying there, and there's a rental house old Bill Ogden lived in that Jean lived in when she passed away.
Yeah.
And Bill had an old dog out there, and that thing was tied up and it was barking. And I hate a barking dog. I cannot stand to hear a dog bark just for no reason. Yeah, if a dog barks, there better be a reason. And so I told Jared, I said, if that dog barks one more time, I'm going to shoot it. A few minutes later, that dog barked. He said, there you go, you got to go shoot it. And so I pick a 10-pump BB gun up that Kyle's got there laying there on the floor, And I walk out, pump that thing up 10 times, and in the pitch black dark, it's probably from here to the end of your driveway, Brandon. How far is that? 75 yards?
No, probably.
I point in the direction of that dog and pull that trigger in the pitch black dark, and that dog goes, "Arr!" Jared said, "Well, you shot that dog." I said, "I told you I was going to shoot that dog," which it was blind luck, right? Dog never makes another peep the rest of the night. Next morning, we're down there in the milk barn, sleepy-headed, and Gary Dale Vincent. Y'all remember Gary Dale?
Oh, yeah.
Gary Dale Vincent comes sliding in the milk barn in that truck, just gravel flying. He runs in there. He said, "You got any of those gloves that go up to your elbow or up to your shoulder?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, those gloves you all check the cows with, see if they're, you got any of them? Well, yeah, there's a whole box of them in there. What do you need them for? He said, I went up there to check on old Bill, because Bill was pretty much bedridden at the time. He said, I went up there to check on old Bill, and he said, went to walk in. He said, something got a hold of that dog last night. He said, bit it in the neck, and it has bled out better than the hammer. He said, it's the awfulest mess, and there's blood everywhere. And I was like, and Jared's
terrible.
over there going, yeah, you see Jared, Jared's like, he said, you killed that old man's dog. I said, I told you I was going to kill that dog. It didn't quit. Which it was just, one of them stupid things like the truck, But yeah, I shot that dog right in the neck from 75 yards with a BB gun. I mean, that's Navy SEAL stuff there, right? So
That's impressive.
yeah, Jared, you see Jared, you ask, you hear somebody shoot a dog with a BB gun in the middle of the night? But Jill come home, they come home that time. They come in the house, and they got home like 10 hours earlier than we thought they were going to. And we didn't have time to clean. She's like, I don't know what y'all been doing in here. She said, but that bathtub, y'all had to be dirtier once you got in that bathtub than when you got out of it, And it was good times. Good times.
Oh, they're good. They good folks.
Gene had us clean Winston's shop out one time. He was working. He had an old tool shed out there, and he didn't throw anything away. She said, you and Billy go out there, and you all throw anything away. It doesn't look like it's good. Okay, Miss Jean. And so we go out there and we load the wagon up. And they had an old dump down there, just a sinkhole. Just take it in there and throw it away. And we took it in there and threw all of it in that hole. Winston come home that afternoon. Needless to say, we went back down there and fished all that back out.
Yeah.
Oh, he was mad.
Yeah.
He's mad at us and said, we just, if Miss Jean told you to do something, you done it.
Yeah.
That's just a respect thing, right? And
Yeah.
we both got in a hornet's nest while we were down there and got stung. I got stung in the left eye, and Billy got stung in the right eye. And neither one of us, could see the next day, but it was fun.
This part of a generation of people that didn't throw things away.
Right.
I don't blame him. I'm like that.
I'm a little bit like that.
My wife will tell you, I don't throw things away much either.
Yeah.
But my mom is not somebody that throws a lot of stuff away. Now, last week they had that county-wide
Clean
clean.
up.
All right, so Dad's been dead now a little over 2 years, and before he quit driving, I'm telling you, I don't know how a man can get that many tires at a place in my life. So Mom said, we need to get rid of some of these tires. Every year she'd say, we're going to watch for this tire amnesty thing and get rid of some of this stuff. So I sent my boys over there on the Friday before last Saturday. I said, get them all out there. And there were some tractor tires we couldn't take. But in that shed up there, I think I counted, there was something like 25 tires that he had. And with none of them he counted.
Well, they was probably still holding air at the time, and he thought he'd put them on a wagon or something.
Some of them come from Delbert Johnson's down there. He just did something to get discarded off a wrecked vehicle.
Whenever
If you farm any at all and you want to depress yourself, just start looking around how many tires you have on your place.
Yeah.
Or batteries.
Or batteries.
Batteries,
But
yeah,
tires,
something like
you just sit there, I got the gooseneck trailer, I got the cattle trailer, I got the hay
just
cutter, I got
just
the bush hog.
just look on Amazon and price them, and just start figuring what it costs to put new ones on everything you got.
That's what I'm saying. Then that's why you put the stuff back in the shed. If it's just got a little, it's just a little dry.
I'm going to say this shed up here at Brandon's house has got more tubes in it. I mean, he has got a tube for just about any size tire.
Kevin had a flat tire on the rake. He thought we was shut down. I said, come on, let's go to the house. We come up here, and I rummage around. It wasn't the exact right size, but we made it work, and I think it's still in there.
Is it folded in half?
It was pretty wrinkled up. I didn't know if it'd work, but like I said, I think it's still in there.
When I was farming, it felt like I was always fixing flat tires or giving something a jump.
Yeah, I was thinking about y'all working on the hay rake when Donkey was telling about the fire under the truck, was that last summer or the summer before when you had the torch out and Kevin's only job was to keep the fire out of the field?
It was dry.
That's down in front of my house.
Yeah.
So
it was
burn the field
dry.
down.
Oh my gosh! I mean, it was about more than Kevin could do just to keep the fire put out.
Yeah, I was using that big rake or Brandon's, and I'd got it. I guess I got it too close to a ditch or something. He had to come over there and work his Brandon magic. He just rolls that vehicle up there, and it looks like
A hammer,
it
a set of
looks like
torches.
the tool trucks had stopped by.
Little Fred Sanford,
Oh my
Fred Sanford
gosh,
rolling out
he's
there.
got more tools he may have seen. And so he's down there and he tells me, Brandon, he just tells you what you need to do and you just do it. And, yeah, man, that spark hit on there. And I was like, oh, my goodness.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. He bought a new toolbox. What is that green one that you bought, Bub?
I traded a wagon for that.
Well, whatever it was, he said, I got this toolbox. That way it's going to be mobile. And I said, what do you mean mobile? He said, well, I'm going to keep my sockets, my wrenches, this and that. And he said, I can just take it from here and put it in there. He said, help me move it. And we moved it twice, and I had to get my gallbladder out.
I ain't never seen like stuff in my life.
I set it in the back of the truck by myself before I went to Kevin's that one year, and my back was jacked up for a month.
Well, yeah, man.
And
Well,
I actually took it out of the back of the truck. It's been in the back of my truck for I don't know how long, and I took it out of the back of the truck today, me and Robbie, and we took the tractor and pallet forks and a pallet and slid it off the tailgate on a pallet
Well,
and
thank
set it
the
in the
Lord.
So
barn.
I've got one size or two smaller than his, and I bought a cart that was the same height as my truck, so I could slide it out on it and just roll it over in the corner of the shop. Mm-hmm. We're too old for lifting around. On
I
that
agree.
Stuff.
Yes,
I agree.
I'm going to agree with that also.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna have to close this one out.
Been a good- yeah,
it's been a really good one, Kevin. We're glad you got to come see us
Glad
and
to
set
do it,
in on
man.
this.
Yeah,
We-
it's,
I'm glad to do it. I appreciate you guys. I think it's great what you're doing. You getting stuff out there.
Well, we want to get the stories told, right? It ain't all the stories. There's no way we could tell all the stories.
No, but if we can just preserve some, if we can preserve some and make a few people laugh and brighten a few people's day. So, you did such a good job on the last one. I'm going to let you throw a shout out to our designer. Go ahead.
Hayes Farmhouse Designs, which is on Etsy and Facebook, correct?
Uh-huh.
She does banners and shirts and does our artwork on our Facebook page.
Custom
So
designs.
check it out.